Last Friday night, we studied part 1 of Sunday Laws, and we got the most hits I've ever had on a sermon, 291. Watch that. Tonight I am going to give you part 2. Tomorrow I'm going to give part 3 in Atlanta. However, if you want to watch part 3, you can go on my YouTube channel later in the week. It's just my name, Wilbur Atwood. That's my channel. And you can see part 3. Or if you missed part 1, you might want to watch that one also. I've been doing a little watching of some of what is going on. And I'm not going to focus on that tonight, but I can say this. We will not need a change in the Constitution. The viewpoint of people, leaders, pastors, has so changed that they cannot read the Constitution correctly anymore. And so there's no barrier. There are some leaders that are talking about torture for fundamentalists, people that want to stick with, the fundamental belief of their whatever it is, and especially if they are divisive from this tremendous union that has been taking place between Protestants and Catholics. And so I think we can safely say the groundwork is there, and it could happen fast. The only thing we don't know is how long God will postpone it. But it could happen very fast. So I think it's time for us to be studying these matters, because we don't know how soon we'll have to face it. This is kind of a sobering thought from 5th Testimonies, page 713. We as a people have not accomplished the work which God has committed to us. We are not ready for the issue to which the enforcement of the Sunday law will bring us. Now, of course, these references, when it talks about coming Sunday law, it's in general, not all of them, but in general, it's talking about the one that almost went in place around the turn of the century of 1900. And by God's grace, that one was defeated, and we have had all this extra time. But the sad part is, this sentence is still true. With the fact that we did know that Sunday laws were coming, we did not do what we needed to do. And so the danger is greatly increased because we didn't do what we were supposed to do to keep it off. Now, here's one of the Bible predictions that is a warning of what will happen in the last days. Daniel 3, verse 12. After everyone was gathered before that image and told that they needed to bow down, a report came to the king. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. That is what Seventh-day Adventists will be accused of doing. The same report will be brought to leaders that was brought to the king. And you know the story. This fits perfectly with Revelation 13, verses 15 and 16. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced, and that's what will take place in the future. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Of course, there is a group that won't receive it, but there will be superhuman attempts to get everybody to receive it, and you may be surprised at who accepts that mark, either in the forehead or in the hand. The first aspect I'd like to look at is, what are the factors that lead to Sunday laws? The first one, and no doubt the most important one, is our own failure. Colporteur Ministry, page 123. Many of our people have been blind to the importance of the very books that were most needed. Now, I'm thankful for these groups that go to big events and pass out great controversy. Not everybody's happy with them, but I'm happy with them. And some time ago, I bought all of them that I could afford to buy, and they've all been given out. But this is referring not only to great controversy, although that is the most important of the ones that Ellen White has written. I'm sure many of you are aware this will be considered hate literature before long. And so now is the time to get it out. And other books, even like Desire of Ages and Patriarchs and Prophets, these books have the full message and a beautiful presentation. And what this is saying is we haven't been very diligent in getting these out. Colporteurs have drifted to other books rather than getting these out. And church members were supposed to be involved, and they haven't been busy getting them out. Had tact and skill then been shown in the sale of these books, the Sunday law movement would not be where it is today. Unless Jesus steps in, there's going to be a Sunday law really soon. But I've read some statements about the fact that we're supposed to be praying that we'll have some more time. So, but because we failed to do the work that was assigned to us, they have gained momentum that if you saw it, you'd be surprised how far down the road they are. Second reason, Signs of the Times of November 28, 1900. Sunday owes its existence as a so-called Christian institution to the mystery of iniquity, and its enforcement will be a virtual recognition of the principles which are the very cornerstone of Romanism. Now, as we study the history, we see what happened when the papacy had the power and could cause governments to do what they wanted, that 50 to 100 million people were killed, and not just killed. They didn't take them out and, use a gun and shoot them, but they tortured them until they welcomed death as a release from this torture. And so they received a deadly wound, and they haven't had that power. But in more modern times, that power is returning, and when it does, they will achieve what they had in mind all along, but couldn't do it. When our nation shall so abjure the principles of its government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will, in this act, join hands with the papacy. It will be giving life to the tyranny which has long been eagerly watching its opportunity to spring again into active despotism. Now, many don't think of it this way or realize, but the papacy is not about religion. Religion is only a front. The papacy is about controlling the world. That's what they're about. And they can get farther by masking it under the garb of religion. The third reason, in a Paulson collection, page 333, plans of serious import to the people of God are advancing in an underhand manner among the clergymen of various denominations. That's why if you don't go looking for it, you don't think that there's much going on, because they work in an underhanded manner to achieve their objectives. They don't want to get Seventh-day Adventists and others like us, we're probably the biggest group, they don't want to get us alarmed to where we do something. So they work in an underhanded manner. And the object of this covert maneuvering is to win popular favor for the enforcement of Sunday sacredness. So they recognize that if they didn't use these kind of tactics, that people would reject their idea. But by working in this manner, they have been successful in winning approval in a very wide circle of leaders, both religious and political. In fact, I didn't realize till this afternoon, as I was watching, how much of this was in the political campaign for president. And it's very obvious when people show you the right clips that this was an issue in this election. If the people can be led to favor a Sunday law, then the clergy intend to exert their united influence to obtain a religious amendment to the Constitution. Now that's talking about the late 1800s. As I said, from what I have witnessed, I don't think they need an amendment to the Constitution. They've already interpreted it in a different way. You know what the common view today is of a large percentage of leaders? Religious liberty is to give the churches control of the United States. In their mind, that is now religious liberty. Our founders' idea of religious liberty was don't let the church control the government so that everybody, whatever religion they have, can freely practice it. But now, the idea of religious liberty is controlling the government so that we become a Christian nation. So they won't need a religious amendment to the Constitution and compel the nation to keep Sunday. That's still part of the agenda, just as a shorter route to get there. Now, the real culprit is Satan. Satan has hated Sabbath keepers from the Garden of Eden. And whenever I traced that last Friday night, whenever he was able to make trouble for those that kept the Sabbath, he has done it. And here's one from Last Day Events, page 125. The Sunday movement is now making its way in darkness. I'm sure you're aware of this. If you're not, you sure need to be. The papacy is hiding the Sunday law under the garb of climate change, under the garb of a family day. And so I expect that the first Sunday law we will see is simply making room for the family, that nobody has to work, everybody has the day off, they can be as a family, they can go to church, and so on. That's the way it will start, because that's the way it's being pushed. The leaders are concealing the real issue, the true issue. And many who unite in the movement do not themselves see whether the undercurrent is tending. When you listen to the discussions of this, they're excited. They think God is with them and that He's really been helping them to reach their objective. But some of them are going to wake up too late that they were pushing the wrong day, and they will be caught in the trap. But, you know, they're with it now. They do not themselves see whether the undercurrent is tending. They are working in blindness. They do not see that if a Protestant government sacrifices the principles that have made them a free, independent nation, and through legislation brings into the Constitution principles that will propagate papal falsehoods and papal delusion, they are plunging into the Roman horrors of the Dark Ages. And I've heard some of them with their own lips announce that torture is okay to get these crazy people back in line. Another one, which we've talked a little more about, is calamities. In Maranatha, page 176, Satan puts his interpretation upon events. And they, the leading men, think as he would have them, that the calamities which fill the land are a result of Sunday keeping. Excuse me, Sunday breaking. It's a result of breaking Sunday. Too many people are not keeping Sunday. And so they believe the only way to get these calamities stopped is to get everybody keeping Sunday. Thinking to appease the wrath of God, these influential men make laws enforcing Sunday observance. They think that by exalting this false rest day higher and still higher, compelling obedience to the Sunday law, the spurious Sabbath, they are doing God service. So they feel God is with us. He will help us to achieve our objective, and so they storm ahead as fast as they can. But of course, at first, they work undercover until they know that they have enough support, and then it becomes more open, and they storm forward to accomplish their mission. However, we need to be clear, and we need to make it clear to as many people as possible that that is not the cause. Here it is. Way back in Genesis 6, verse 3, the story of the flood. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man." In other words, he gave them 120 years, and he said, my Holy Spirit is going to withdraw from the earth because of the wickedness that exists in the earth. I'm going to withdraw. The less righteous people there are on the earth, the more the Spirit has to withdraw. And this is also spoken of in Matthew 24, verse 37. For as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. The more they force the Sunday issue, the more the Spirit withdraws. And so it's self-defeating. They're hoping that they're going to get rid of these calamities. But instead, they're encouraging the calamities, and they don't even realize that's what they're doing. Christian Service, page 52, says, the restraining Spirit of God is even now being withdrawn from the world. That had to be written from 70 to 100 years ago. If it was already being withdrawn back then, what about now? Hurricanes, storms, tempests, fire and flood, disasters by sea and land follow each other in quick succession. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. Never has that been more true than right now. However, we've been encouraged by saying there's not going to be such a huge war that the gospel cannot go. We'll have small ones, but not huge ones until the gospel has finished. And yet, all these things are going on with a rapidity that they've never gone on before. We only hear a little bit of the calamities that go on in the world today. And if you were somehow able to tune in to every calamity that happened in a year's time, you'd be shocked at what's really going on. However, they are pointed in the wrong direction to stop it. And so it's going to increase. It's true, righteousness exalteth a nation. The Bible says that. Righteousness exalteth a nation. But by keeping the wrong day of worship, you're not producing righteousness. And so it's increasing the wickedness. And this is going to cause more and more calamities to fall, which spurs them on to work harder and faster. So we've looked at several of these. Let's see, did I skip? I thought I had a review. No, I guess I didn't. Who causes Sunday laws? Fifth Testimonies, page 450 and 451. Men of position and reputation. So we're talking about a leadership problem here when we're thinking about Sunday laws. Men of position and reputation will join with the lawless and the vile to take counsel against the people of God. So the people that, form mobs and who are people that like to cause trouble for other people, they join together. And here's some other factors. Wealth, genius, education will combine to cover them with contempt. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members. And don't think there's no Seventh-day Adventist ministers or church members that'll be a part of this. They will. All those who resist conversion and don't actually get converted, even though they're Adventists, they will become a part of this. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members will conspire against them with voice and pen, by boasts, threats, and ridicule. They will seek to overthrow their faith. So the first attempt is to try to convince God's people that they are wrong and that the majority is right. And unfortunately, many will fall for that. With voice and pen, by boasts, threats, and ridicule, they will seek to overthrow their faith. By false representations and angry appeals, they will stir up the passions of the people. And one video I looked at showed several of the leaders in their angry tirade against fundamentalists. Not having a thus saith the Scriptures to bring against the advocates of the Bible Sabbath, they will resort to oppressive enactments to supply the lack. The power of the government will be used because the preaching can't do it. So they have to get the government to pass these laws in order to cover the fact that they don't have even one Bible verse to support it. To secure popularity and patronage, legislators will yield to the demand for a Sunday law. Now, until recently, I thought that that was still in the future. But I'll have to tell you, it's already been happening. A lot of it has already been happening. Now, some of you at least are familiar with some of the religious movements of the past that were trying to gain control of one of the parties. And they kept failing. But they have succeeded now. And so it came about in order to get elected. It came about yielding to the popularity, to secure popularity and patronage. Now, they haven't all done it yet, I don't think, but some have. And there are people calling legislators and saying, we want this climate change, we believe it's necessary, and so the pressure is on right now, just like it says here. Here was the list I thought was earlier. Why Sunday laws succeed. How come we come to this? Number one, a failure to distribute, great controversy, and so forth. So we have been part of why the Sunday laws are going to come. However, let's say this, if we get busy, we can still do something, and we need to do that. Number two, it has been the plan of the papacy all along. They're just, happy that it's really looking like it's going to work out. Number three, has been planned by Protestant ministers. Not all of them, but some of them have been working at this, and now it's pretty close to wholesale. All are cooperating with it. Number four, some of those ministers are blind to what the outcome is going to be. And so they're cooperating with it, but if they really knew the whole story, they wouldn't be. And that's our job. We need to try to help those find out what they are doing. Number five, the meaning of disasters have been misunderstood. And number six, it's going to be a groundswell. It's going to come from the people and fueled by the ministers largely, because the largest segment of individuals in the United States and the world actually are Christians. So the ministers are going to be the key players in causing legislators to receive pressure to make Sunday laws. Now let's look at the national Sunday law. That's the one we've talked about. But you know, if you look back at the Dark Ages, it was step by step. There wasn't just one law that just did the job. It was mild at first, and then stronger, and then punishments kept getting worse and worse. And so I haven't been able to figure out from my study right now just where the one called National Sunday Law falls. But I don't believe it's the first one. I don't expect it to be the first one. But it, whoops, what happened there? I think I stepped on, there we go. Stepped on the wire maybe. So here's one from 7th Bible Commentary, page 977. When our nation in its legislative councils shall enact, and notice the word is plural there, enact laws to bind the consciences of men in regard to their religious privileges, enforcing Sunday observance, and bringing oppressive power to bear against those who keep the seventh-day Sabbath, the law of God will, to all intents and purposes, be made void in our land. And national apostasy will be followed by national ruin. Right now, the slogan is, we're going to make this country great. What they don't realize is that they are going to destroy this country. Because national apostasy, enforcing Sunday, is going to cause national ruin. But, of course, they can't see that at the present time. So, it does look like a series of laws. And like I say, I expect the first one to simply be a support of climate change. Because in that climate change concept is a Sunday family day. And I learned of a few people that were near the White House, I believe, or one of those areas, when the Pope came to address Congress back in 2012. And they had a banner set up there with the pure woman of Revelation. And some Catholic leaders thought that was Mary. So they came over to the table to talk with the Adventists that were there. And the Adventists were pointing out to them that we think this family day has a religious purpose, and that it is really the beginning of a Sunday law. And the priest said to them, "You're very smart young men." So, you know, they know what they're doing, but many of us don't know what is happening. Now, there is, I think, a very important Bible verse or two in regard to the National Sunday Law. In Mark 13, verse 14, it says, "But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand." In other words, you better understand what this is talking about. "Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains." Now, we're familiar with the first application of this. And when the Roman armies came to Jerusalem, they surrounded Jerusalem. Jesus had given them the warning. He said, when you see that, you need to leave. Immediately leave. Of course, they couldn't leave till the army left, but in other words, as soon as the army left, they were to leave. And Ellen White explains why. Because the Jews couldn't stop them. They were running after the Romans, chasing the Romans. The Romans couldn't stop them because they were heading on a different mission. And so the Christians all vacated immediately the city of Jerusalem and were not involved in the destruction. In the book Maranatha, page 180, it says, as the siege of Jerusalem by the Roman armies was the signal for flight to the Judean Christians, so the assumption of power on the part of our nation in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath will be a warning to us. So here we have a second application in the last days, that when the Sunday law is passed, and from the context and all, it seems to be the one that's called the National Sunday Law. As I said, I don't expect that to be the first one. But when that is passed, that is the signal. If anybody is still living in a big city, they better leave immediately. They won't have time to sell their house. They won't have time to even carry off maybe all their belongings. Jesus told his disciples, he said, if you're in the field, just leave from the field. Don't go back to your house. If you're on the rooftop, don't go down in your house. Just leave. And so this is the final call to leave the big cities. Now, we've been told we should leave the cities long ago. And if we leave soon enough, we can sell our property and get something in the country. But it's getting down to where, when this happens, you know, a lot of people are going to lose their houses. When will the National Sunday Law be made? That's what everybody would like to know. When is it going to be made? Last Day Events 2:27 is the only clue I've found. The Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is to be the great test for the people of God. The great test for Seventh-day Adventists, by which their eternal destiny will be decided. Any Seventh-day Adventist that won't stand up for the Sabbath is going to be lost. That's the issue that's going to test us, and it's going to happen before the close of probation. That's all we can say. We can't say, you know, it's going to happen next year or this year now. We can't say that. We can't say it's next year. We can't say when, but we do know it's before the close of probation. Now, this is actually a blessing, just like we heard earlier that trials are a blessing. The Sabbath issue is going to bring us to the most difficult times that any of us have ever been in, but it's a blessing. Here it is, Last Day Events, page 179. The great issue, so near at hand, that's the enforcement of Sunday laws, will weed out those whom God has not appointed. There are people in leadership that God didn't put there. They managed to get there because of their friends or because they had a plan to get there. But they're going to be all sifted out. It will weed out those whom God has not appointed. And he will have a pure, true, sanctified ministry prepared for the latter rain. And that's the note I want to close on, because it might be discouraging just to think about the other, although we do need to think about it. But this Sunday law business, it coincides with the greatest moment of Earth's history, when the latter rain is being poured out upon his people, and there is a power that we have never had before. But he can't really do it until he tests the Adventist church and separates the ones that are truly his children from those that are not. But once he has accomplished that, he's going to pour out the latter rain. And for a while, they're going to have trouble doing what they want to do. But eventually they'll make it. But there's so much power through the Holy Spirit that it will set them back. It's kind of like, you know, that last week of Jesus' life on earth. He went into the synagogue every day, and they couldn't do a thing. There was so much power, and he had so much wisdom. There was nothing they could do until the week was over and the time was there, and then they were allowed to have power over Jesus. Well, it's going to be the same here as we come to the end. So you don't want to miss that. Don't get scared about the Sunday laws and what will happen to you. You want to be a part of that because it's going to be the most wonderful part of the history of this world. May God bless each of us. I would recommend, you know, not too much time, but I think it's worth. You are looking at some of what's available. Now, I don't go for the spin that they put on it. You know, they have their reasons for sharing it. I just take what they report about what's actually happened. That's what I look at. And then the rest, I let the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy tell me what to think. So I recommend that as the right way to do it. But I think we should be familiar with some of these things. Well, if our song leaders could come up, we'll have a final song.